So Stoll informed Kuhn about LSD, and Kuhn became very interested in it because he was responsible also or working to develop a truth drug for the Nazis. And this LSD was very strong, so Kuhn thought maybe if you give it to people without telling them, maybe you can, control people or influence people. So the Nazis did this test series in the concentration camp of Dachau because of that connection.
Norman Ohler, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
It's a pleasure. Happy.
Yeah, sorry, what was that?
I'm happy we can talk about these things, whatever these things are.
Me too. I'm excited to get into your most recent book, Tripped, which I just had the pleasure of going through because your contact was kind enough to advance me a copy. And the full title of the book for people who should definitely check it out is Tripped, Nazi Germany, CIA, and the Dawn of Psychedelics. And before we even get into the project, I'm just wondering, because it's such a huge project to put out a book. It's such a big undertaking. How do you feel when you release it? Is that a relieving feeling? Are you thinking about things that you could change? What is it like to have an ongoing project like that for years and then all of a sudden it's just out there?
I mean, there are different phases in the project. One is one important one is the writing, obviously. Before that comes the concept of the book and then the research. So these three phases are done by me, and then when the text is ready, publishers take over, and they have their own idea for marketing and packaging. And sometimes that's a painful process because you always, as an author, or me as an author, have the idea how it has to be ideally, marketed and packaged. But sometimes that varies from the publisher's approach for several reasons. So that process of completely dominating a project, which is what the writer does when he or she writes it, or it writes it, that changes, and that can be painful. And and then when the book comes out, it's actually not a big deal. Like today, the book comes out in America. I mean, I think about it, but it's not a huge release. It's already in the past for me. So it's even a little bit, weird to talk about it, now, because for me, I wrote it a half a year ago or a year ago. So I'm already thinking about different projects. So, but still, obviously it's great to have the book in your hands, because from the pipe dream, it morphs into such a precise, such a typical product, which is a book. So it's kind of funny to actually then hold the book, but I never read it because I know what's inside. But I do love books as objects. So on publication day, I'm always happy to have actually the book.
Yeah, I was just curious because. Yeah. I was curious because podcasting is such an instant gratification where you record something and then you maybe edit it, cut some things out for clarity, and then you release it 2 weeks later. Whereas a book, you're working on something for years, sometimes decades, depending on how long the project is. Do you feel that you lose control in the marketing process at all? Are there elements where you're I have to do this, but if it was my way, I would have done something else with the cover art, or just the way the book is put together?
Yeah, it actually happens. With some books, everything is perfect, but mostly there's problems with the cover, or even with the title, or even that starts earlier in the editorial process. I mean, my editors. It's not like the editors change the. I mean, they can change the book actually. It just depends, that you make decisions together, with your editor. The editor suggests something, and maybe it makes sense to you, and you agree. And then months later, you maybe think that this was a wrong decision. Today, I would write it different, I would structure it differently. So I forgot what your question was, but it's a long and difficult process with many stages. And you do lose control sometimes.
Losing control. Yeah, that's perfect. Because I'm just curious. I'm also a big fan of stand-up comedy, and one thing I hear comics talk about is the way that they can lose control of the process when they put out a special, because they tell these jokes, they work on jokes for years, and then they release a special, and then you have someone who's not a stand-up comedian telling you what you should cut out, what's funny, what's not funny. And it's like, sometimes those people, they're just like doing a job or saying things because they feel like they have to, and it's not actually the best advice.
I mean, they can also improve something. I do believe that work should be edited, but it's a double-edged sword. And at least in literature and probably also in stand-up comedy, it's like only a few people. While if you make a film, for example, I think the pressure on the artist, on the director is much more intense and much more frustrating. So literature is still a field where you can, like my new book, which will come out this fall, The Magic Mountain. There's nothing, everything is exactly how I wanted it to be. The title, the cover, the strategy of the publishing house, it's, everything seems perfect. So also this happens. While in film, this is probably extremely hard to achieve.
Yeah. What originally drew you to start writing about drugs? Because your last book, Blitzed, dives into Pervitin and Nazi Germany, that whole connection. Obviously, this one is more about LSD, psychedelics. There's also the Nazi crossover. Like, what was it that drew you originally into spending so much time writing about just the drugs that you've chosen?
I mean, I have written now with The Magic Mountain 8 books, and 2 of them are about drugs. So it's 1/4, which I guess is a lot. Most writers.
Is Magic Mountain not about magic mushrooms? Because that's what I would have guessed after this one.
No, actually not. It's a story about a skiing trip with my 14-year-old daughter to Davos, Switzerland.
Got it.
And how this skiing trip ends in a reflection on life and on the global state and on the planetary crisis and on the world we give to our children. I mean, it's not about drugs actually, but drugs play a little role. I'm in this hotel in Switzerland, and I get some cannabis from the waiters, and it actually helps me understand certain things. So I like drugs personally. I use some drugs. I don't use all drugs, but I think some drugs are beneficial to me, to my mental health. I mean, I'm not suffering from any disease, a mental disease. I don't have depression or traumatic disorders or anything. Not that I'm aware of, but still, that's why I think psychedelic drugs and cannabis are actually, cannabis I'm not so sure, even though I also consume it, but I think psychedelics are really quite beneficial to the brain. So I find them interesting on a personal level, but that doesn't automatically mean that I would write about it, because I don't write about anything that I find interesting. So it was actually a coincidence that brought the drugs into the writing as like a major topic, and that was when a friend of mine, who actually left my apartment just 10 minutes ago, DJ, Alex is his name, he told me in 2010 that the Nazis were using a lot of drugs and that I should write about it. And I had never heard this before, even though, I'm German, so I'm quite well educated about the dictatorship under Hitler. So we get a lot of education about it in school. Right? It's an important part of us growing up to know everything about the Nazis. But drugs were never part of this education. Like, I never heard that Nazis had taken drugs. No one in Germany knew this. But I could find, but Alex had heard of it because a friend of his had found Pervitin, which is the medication that was on the market in Germany at the time, which contains methamphetamine, which is methamphetamine. It was a normal drug. It was not illegal. And he found this still a package in 2010 from the 40s in an old East German apartment. Like, that's kind of a specialty of Berlin that things get like, suddenly they come up, like in some drawer, you find something from the past. So they found actually Pervitin from the 40s and took it because they were adventurous and they still had a meth experience, but a clean meth experience, because it's not like crystal meth in some black, like
the good shit, the OG
it was,
shit. Yeah.
I don't know if I wouldn't call it good, but at least it's professionally made by the German pharmaceutical company. Yeah. So it's pure meth. Your teeth don't fall out, but you still, have also negative side effects, obviously. Mm-hmm. But when they took it, they thought it was great. Actually, they had very good effects. You might have bad side effects, but they had good effects. So they told me about this, and then I Googled, and there was like a few hints that methamphetamine was used widely during those times. But then I really researched it in archives, and I found a lot of stuff. So this is how the first book, Blitzed, came about. And then while I was researching Blitzed, which is mainly a methamphetamine and an opioid story, I also came across psychedelic experiments that the Nazis did in the concentration camp of Dachau. And I thought this is quite interesting because psychedelics and Nazis, that's not something that goes together. You can imagine like Nazis and meth, become this robot type soldier kind of, that's a typical, image, which works, which was truthful, because they used a lot of meth on the soldiers.
Yeah, Nazis and meth seem like chocolate and peanut butter. They would just fit perfectly together.
Yeah, but Nazis...
sorry to cut you off. I just had a question about when your friends were taking the World War II Pervitin, the meth, because the image that pops up into my head is that scene from Wolf of Wall Street where they buy the old ludes, and the ludes are the Quaaludes that are decades old, and they have to they take multiple ludes because they're so old, the time release is off. So they're not high after 30 minutes or they're not high after 90 minutes. So they keep taking more and more, and then it all kicks in at once. Did your friends have any experience like that where they didn't feel the first couple and then they took some more and they were like, holy shit, like it's actually working?
Yeah, well, he told me I took one and it was okay. Like I could feel a little bit. Then I took another one and it was like a little stronger. Then I took a third one, and then he said, and he pointed down at the river, which you can see here. Sometimes big ships go by, and he said, I felt like one of these ships that suddenly gets like this huge engine push, to move. So the third one really made it for him.
Third time's the charm.
I don't know. I mean, they had like 100 pills, and they took it, they took it quite quickly, So I guess they really liked it. But these are also drug enthusiasts. I would not do this, but he's a DJ and he likes to take his drugs, especially stuff that keeps him awake. And I guess this Pervitin,
I bet, yeah,
did keep
especially
him awake.
Especially those 4 or 5 a.m. sets where you finish and the sun's up. I'm sure the drugs come in handy for sure. I've experienced them as the audience member at a DJ set, so I'm sure as the artist, it's also helpful.
Yeah.
So
this is how I got into it.
Yeah. You mentioned, so your DJ friend, I was actually listening to a podcast that came out recently that you did with Hamilton Morris, and you mentioned that you had a chat with a DJ friend about writing LSD, and your friend said that LSD is not a story, don't do it, it's not important. Is this the same friend, or are those two different DJ friends?
No, that's the second one. His name is Ricardo Villalobos. He's a known DJ, actually, who lives in Berlin. He's a friend of mine, and
Got it.
I met him during Corona, and he said it makes sense to write about meth and Nazis because it's, how did you call it, peanut butter and
chocolate. Peanut butter and jelly works too, yeah.
But he thought LSD is not an interesting story, but he was wrong. So when the book came out in Germany, he actually played at the book premiere. So he kind of reconciled with the project.
Yeah. So when he tells you that, because when a friend tells you something and they're saying don't do what you're about to do, what did you see about LSD that made you realize, no, there is a story, like that there's a whole book, in fact?
Well, it had a lot to do with my family because I started researching the LSD book, and then I read a white paper by an American startup company called Elusis, and that white paper claimed that microdosed LSD might counteract Alzheimer's disease because they found in studies that same receptors that Alzheimer degenerates are stimulated through LSD. And I discussed this with my father because my mother has Alzheimer. And my father basically said he was a former judge and sent people to prison for drugs. And so he's not really a drug person, but he's also, I would say, a liberal mind. So he was like contemplating the idea of giving, his wife LSD. And, but he wanted me to examine the LSD story. He said, like, quite a reasonable question. If LSD is so promising, why can't I buy it in the pharmacy? What went wrong? He wanted to know. So that kind of got me started in really researching this book and becoming interested in the history of LSD, because why is it illegal? What went wrong? Really is an interesting question that I try to solve in the research.
Yeah, no, that's something that I was thinking about throughout the reading of Tripped. Is there are all these pharmaceuticals, there are all these drugs that are widely available that do have, a lot of them terrible side effects. Some of them help quite a bit, but you can walk into a CVS and purchase all of them. And then you have something like LSD that seems to be more beneficial when used the right way than a lot of things that are currently widely available. And, as we'll get into, you go into that whole question of like, why the hell can't I buy this, in a vial? Why can't I buy this in a dropper bottle at the pharmaceutical counter? Why do I have to go to some dealer, meet some guy on the corner or use some app to get it?
Yeah, it's totally absurd. Sandoz, the company who developed LSD or discovered it, they thought it would be a game changer in mental health because this was in the mid-40s when a lot of people had mental illnesses because of the World War that was about to end and was in its most terrible end phase. And they like in Basel, which is like on the German border, so they were very close to the war, but still in a neutral country, and they set up an intoxication room, like a tripping room, in the company of Sandoz. And this was before LSD had a bad an obscure or a disputed reputation. No one knew what it was, and the employees just took it. And then they reported their experiences to a secretary who was typing it all up. And I read these reports, and the people were really having a good time on LSD. And these were all kinds of different workers for the company: chemists, bookkeepers, secretaries. Anyone could go and take LSD, and they all had, they said that they couldn't stop smiling, or they finally understood so much more about their life, or they looked outside the window and realized, that they're one with nature. Like they had all these kinds of experiences, which are pleasurable and good or fun or healing experiences. So Sandoz thought that they actually had a very good chance of creating a novel type medication that would make them a lot of money and would heal the world, basically. And then, why didn't it happen? Do you want me to tell the whole story, or do you want to ask specific questions?
Yeah, no, I want to get into it. First, I just want to say what a wild time that would have been to be a researcher at Sandoz back in the the 30s and 40s, where it's because it's such a cavalier, ballsy way to study drugs, where you're like, I don't know what the hell this is going to do. We just synthesize this. Let's just take it and see what happens. There's so many new laws and new attitudes about drugs that would prevent that from happening today. It's just wild to think about that was something that could go on in a doctor's office back then.
Yeah, I mean, Sandoz was a global player, so it was, very serious pharmaceutical industry stuff. And Albert Hofmann, the discoverer of LSD, I found a memo that he wrote in the archives of Novartis, which is a big pharmaceutical player that bought Sandoz in the 90s. And he suggested in the early 50s to his CEO, Arthur Stoll, that Sandoz should be transformed into a pharmaceutical giant that examines psychedelic medicines, like not only LSD, but creates like an abundance of psychedelic medicines, because you can, change the molecule, add this, add that, and then see how it reacts in the human mind. So he wanted to thoroughly investigate, research the whole topic, and make Sandoz basically the global player for psychedelic pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Which is a great idea. That's what every company dreams of now. It's just the stupid lawmakers who basically don't know anything about these substances because the anti-drug laws obviously are not based on scientific findings, but on cultural habit and on especially ideological reasons. Which I also examine in TRIP, where does prohibition actually come from? Who wants that and why? It's an interesting question.
Yeah, maybe we should get all the world leaders together, these politicians, and dose them at the same time and see what happens.
Well,
Just throw them on one wild trip.
These drugs are also neutral in a way. Like, I wouldn't say that LSD necessarily makes you a better person. What is proven by now, clinically proven, is that it enhances your neuroplasticity, which is the ability of your brain to kind of be fluid and continuously. This is like neuroplasticity happens all the time.
Yeah.
The brain is not like a rigid thing. It's a fluid thing. It could constantly like connects and
like making new pathways and stuff. Yeah,
that's what it does. And if you take psychedelics, this movement or this ability is enhanced, and at the same time neuroinflammation is reduced, and neuroinflammation is responsible for dementia. So it's I would say I'm convinced it's actually healthy to take LSD. I'm not saying everyone should take a huge trip all the time, but I think LSD as a substance is good for the brain. I think it's like a brain food. I think it doesn't make you dependent. It doesn't have any physical hangover effects. It just makes you smarter. That's what the studies show. So if you actually want to read the studies, which people who prohibit LSD, I don't know, maybe they don't want people to get smarter. I mean, it's LSD should be legal for sure, 100%. And there should be regulations how you take it. People should know how they can benefit from it. Basically, does it make you a better person? I wouldn't say so. I think it can also. If you have very firm beliefs about yourself and you're very maybe self-assured, then LSD could even increase that.
So we're back from the technical difficulty. The I guess the Wi-Fi gods were messing with us, but you were saying that you were talking about LSD LSD being a neutral drug. And that just because you take LSD doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have a positive effect. The drug itself is amoral.
Yeah, I think it makes you smarter, or you have a good chance that it actually is good for your brain because it increases it it improves the
Yeah.
neural network. But you could also use that increased intelligence for evil means, obviously. That's why it is amoral, and people have murdered on LSD. Um,
Yeah.
I think MDMA might be different, because on MDMA you really build up empathy for other people. You don't do that on LSD. LSD is more like cerebral. I mean,
Yeah.
often it happens that you have these mystic experiences and you feel one with everybody, but it's not guaranteed. You might also feel, alienated by LSD, I would say.
Do you remember your first trip on LSD? Because I haven't taken it yet. I've taken other psychedelics, but I've yet to take LSD.
Yes, this was in New York in 1993. It was given to me by my girlfriend at the time, Anna. She said, here's some LSD, let's take it together. And I had actually never taken a drug. I mean, I've smoked weed maybe 3 times or something. So this LSD was very, very strong, and I had intense hallucinations, and I really knew nothing about LSD. Like, I didn't know the difference between LSD and whatever, I just took it. I was very naive, but so I thought it would never end and that I would go crazy. It was very intense. It was like a bad trip. But within the bad trip also was a very interesting trip. Like, the whole thing was very interesting. Like, and then it did stop, it stops. Even strong LSD after 8 to 10 hours, it goes away,
Yeah.
So I was very happy when it went away, even though the experience was very interesting, like very bizarre. I saw things that I basically saw that I saw the abyss. Or I saw that there's a negative, a dark side to existence. Like, before that, I was a bit naive. So this LSD kind of opened my eyes, which was kind of a painful process. Like, I didn't really want to know that, people can be bad and the world can be horrible. But we all know that it is like this, and this was actually what LSD showed me.
How was that dark side manifesting itself? Was it you were seeing shadows around people, or did you see trees or other objects behaving a certain way? Like, how did that darkness reveal itself to you?
Well, the first thing was that we walked up, I think it was 10th Street in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, east on the east side, between Avenue A and First Avenue. And so that's a very defined block, which takes usually, I don't know how many minutes it takes. And on that block, we saw, it took forever. Like, we walked this block for a very long time, and the tarmac was coming towards us in the same speed. Like, it was really bizarre. Like, we were like walking on a treadmill. Like, we wouldn't move. But then we actually did move, and we saw that there were like 4 guys who were like a gang, and they were suddenly singling out one of them, and in front of our eyes, they killed this one person. Like, they banged his head on the hood of a car.
Jesus.
And I said to Anna, do you see this also? And she saw it also. And then when the guy was dead, they resurrected him, like they gave mouth to mouth, and then he was alive again, and he was still joking with them again, and they were, so this was a complete hallucination. Like, but we both had it, and so we picked up something, about, I don't know, it was very strange. And then we walked up to 2nd Avenue, and there was a full blown riot in Manhattan on 2nd Avenue, where people were stopping cabs, dragging people out of cabs, bashing in windows with car windows with baseball bats. This was a huge thing, and it didn't exist. Like, the next day we looked online, like we hallucinated that. And that was actually the only time ever that I hallucinated like this on LSD. I even thought it wasn't LSD, but then I spoke to some people, LSD experts. They say the first trip, when the brain is really not, used to what's going to happen, like the brain is really like overpowered by this dance in the head, and you might really imagine things that are not there. So the first trip, when it's a very strong dose, can be extremely intense. So I had the most intense trip. I never had a trip like this afterwards, even though I took higher dosages, but I never got there again, because it was also funny. Like, I went into a bar at the Notel Motel, which was, I think, on Avenue A. And I saw my friend, her name was Dora, and she was like this short, like she was all the way down, like between my feet. She was standing there having a miniature drink. And I said to her, Dora, how are you? She's like, I'm good. How are you? I said,
yeah, you're just like leaning down to her.
I know you're quite, she was short, she was from Peru, but I said, you're so short now. Okay, how do I look? And she said, you look just normal. And so this was also very funny. And
yeah.
This trip was amazing. I mean, in retrospect, I still talk about it, So even when you have a bad trip on LSD, it's actually what Albert Hofmann said, it's actually a good trip. Because a bad trip is just maybe a little bit too intense, or you think like, my God, will this ever end? And will I have a psychosis now? Because everyone always tells you when you have like too much LSD, you might have a mental breakdown or something. So you think about these things while you're on LSD. You're like wondering, is this happening to me now? But actually,
I've thought about that multiple times on different drugs, and something I always try to remind myself is this is going to end at some point, whether it's the next day or the next hour. This experience has an ending somehow.
I mean, I think there is cases when people actually have severe problems because they took LSD and psilocybin or any other drug, psychedelic drug. I think this happens. I think so I think people should be very careful. Like when you take it for the first time, you should maybe take it with someone who's experienced. Maybe you shouldn't take such a huge dose. Maybe you should know exactly what you're taking. You should take maybe 100 micrograms and not 250, because with 100 you're not going to have a psychosis. You'll have a strong LSD experience, but it's not going to be mind blowing. If you want that extreme experience, you have to dosage higher. But that's at your own risk, because right now there's no one really helping you. Like you have to know a friend, or you can't. It's a problem. But actually, you only need a friend who's experienced with it, and then you're fine.
Yeah. I have a few people in mind for that. That's also, it's so fascinating that you had a shared trip.
Yeah, that was very weird. Yeah,
and it wasn't just an image, like an entire riot happening in New York City, which either it was a shared trip or New York City was just so bad in the 80s and 90s that it didn't make the news. So it's one or the other.
We saw real violence, but we also...
Yeah,
it was fun. We saw many things, and we did have a shared trip. And at one point we separated because I said, Anna, I have to go home. I just want to sit on my sofa and just want to see what happens when I'm at home. Because also at one point a guy came up to me. I was walking on 2nd Avenue, and he looked like he was on drugs, and he tickled my belly like this and passing me, and he said, "You're one of us now." And I'm like, what the fuck? I don't want to be one. It was very trippy. Actually, it was really amazing. I mean, I would pay a lot of money if I could have that trip again, just to like be in that insane. It was daring, but it was also amazing.
Yeah.
And then when I was home, she was walking alone through downtown Manhattan, and she called from a payphone because there were no cell phones at the time. She said, she was crying, "I don't know where I am. You have to come back." And I said, "Where are you?" And she couldn't tell me. So I just hang up, and I walked outside, and after like 3 minutes, I found her in the Saturday night evening crowd of downtown Manhattan. So this trip was, I don't know if magical is the right word, but it was unusual. It had magical qualities, I think.
Yeah. I'm sure that guy tickling your belly thought it was magical.
This is such a weird thing that he walks towards me. How would he know that I'm on LSD or something? Like, I must have looked really like insane, and he kind of picked up on that and kind of said, "Yeah, you're part of the club now." And I said, "I don't want to be in the club."
To me, that's the scariest part of the whole trip. If some guy walked up to me, tickled my belly, and said, "You're one of us now," like, forget the riots, forget the violence. I'd be like, this is horrifying.
Like in a David Lynch movie. It was pretty scary.
Yeah. So speaking of the crime or lawlessness, whether it was real or totally imagined, one of the many parts of the book I found fascinating, but one in particular is you describe the state of Germany directly after World War II and the state of Berlin and how lawless and how chaotic it was. And, in history class in high school, the class shifts after World War II is over, and then it kind of comes back to America if you're going to history class in America. But there's no lingering on Germany post World War II really until things start to happen decades later. So like that time where you describe, and I pulled out a quote from the book, you said the phenomenon of crime in Germany has reached a level and forms unparalleled in the history of Western civilization. And that I believe that was describing Berlin right after World War II ended. How does the lawlessness in post-Nazi Germany set the stage for the future of psychedelics? Like, can you talk about that time and like all that shit that was going on and how that affected the future culture of LSD?
I mean, it's a very complex question, but I'll try to give a picture. I mean, I was interested in the narcotics control officer that the United States armed forces, well, actually the American government, I'm sorry. He was part of the military, but it was he was employed by the American government because he came from the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, this guy, and his files are in Washington. I read them by chance. I found them, and he's describing how he arrives in Berlin, and it's like complete chaos in 45 in the summer.
And this is Arthur Giuliani?
Yeah, that's his name, Arthur Giuliani, yeah. I mean, people were just cutting trees in the park so they could light a fire in the winter, and there was actually starvation in the city. And there was no shop, there was no store, so you had to buy. You got your things on the black market. So the black market was like your, department store. You go out, to the black market, and you trade basically. So Germans had like valuable, maybe some medals from the Nazis. They were trading that for like Snickers or stuff like that. So for Americans it was a great time. Also for the soldiers, like they could trade some of their cigarettes and get like,
I bet,
like a steel helmet for it or something. And drugs were also traded quite liberally back then. There was no law basically in Germany. I mean, Berlin was divided by the four allied powers: Soviet Union, United States, France, Great Britain. And they all didn't really like each other. So every sector of Berlin was, had its own regulations. And that is, of course, perfect for something like drugs. There's no real regulation, and and drugs are everywhere because the German army had a lot of drugs. The German army didn't exist anymore. The Wehrmacht studied the drugs, but the drugs still existed. So Pervitin, methamphetamine was being traded, heroin, which was a German product. And this Giuliani now, his job was to bring order to the chaos, and his boss, his name is Anslinger. He was the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which later became the DEA, and Anslinger he was against drugs. His first job was to monitor the prohibition against alcohol, and he miserably failed, and then alcohol was legalized again. So then he picked cannabis. Cannabis was legalized in the United States. He was most successful with keeping and making, persecuting weed smokers. Because he was also racist, and he hated the Afro-American jazz scene in Harlem. So he wanted to find a tool to attack the jazz scene, which to him was undermining the morale of America. So, like, Billie Holiday was one of his enemies, and so this is a right-wing, racist, awful guy who happens to be the director of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics and determines U.S. drug policy. Yeah. And Berlin for him was like a playground. He wanted his agent to create a new anti-drug law that all the powers of the sectors, like the four allies, all agree on, like under the under the pen of the United States, everyone agrees to this anti-drug policy that's then executed, and the Americans are the big winners. They made Germany drug-free because Anslinger wanted to make the whole world drug-free, so he was pushing his agenda into the United Nations. He was the drug ambassador at the United Nations, and the United Nations were forming back then were under America was the most influential country within the United Nations because they were the most the economy was the strongest and the military was the strongest, so they had leverage against nations. So everyone had to adopt the American anti-drug laws. Actually, Anslinger's racist prohibitionist scheme became our reality today.
Yeah. Didn't he outlast? He outlasted 5 U.S. presidents or something like that. So he was just a career anti-drug guy from the beginning. He was
very good at his job.
Yeah, he was a piece of he was a piece of shit. It sounds like, but he had stamina for sure. He kept at it. I have a quote here from John Ehrlichman that you included in the book, and he was an advisor to Nixon, and during the Nixon campaign, Anslinger was still in charge of the drug policy.
Crazy.
And John Ehrlichman says the Nixon campaign, which was run by Anslinger, had 2 enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or be black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin and then criminalizing them both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the purpose of drugs? Of course we did. And so, if that doesn't make the point about the true motivations behind Anslinger's tactics, I don't know what will.
Yeah, it's a good quote.
Yeah. So Giuliani was sent by Anslinger to go to Berlin, and so Giuliani's job was to kind of like control the chaos in the American portion of Berlin at the time, and it sounds like Giuliani was clashing with the other sectors, like they couldn't really manifest what they wanted in Berlin.
Well, like he always complained about the French. They didn't care about drugs. Like they were like, what are you talking about? We have different problems on our hands. Also, we need to have a good dinner tonight. What do we care about drugs? And the British he didn't really talk about the British and his Russian counterparts, because they all had a narcotics officer. Also, the Soviets had one. And he said that the Soviet guy always said the opposite of what he said, based like by principle. I don't know if that's true. Maybe he also said always the opposite of what the Soviet guy said. But privately, they were like have friends and they went drinking. But as soon as they were like meeting in the drugs commission of Occupy Berlin, they didn't get along. So that was already the Cold War starting. Soviet Union and America always having different opinions on everything, basically. The Soviet Union was not really against drugs. I mean, they were more. They didn't have this. They didn't have this Anslinger, thing going.
Yeah.
But now they are. I mean, now if you look at Russia today, it's a total anti-drug country. Like if you bring weed into Russia, if you get caught at the border, you might end up in prison for like 17 years. It's like America. It's like America in the 60s or 50s or 60s.
Yeah, there was that whole Brittany Griner incident where the WNBA player, she got caught with vials of tincture. I don't even think she had actual flour on her. It was just the vials, and she obviously got put away for a while until we could make a trade.
Oh.
Yeah. Did you? I thought I heard you mention in a past interview that you were able to visit the actual Harry Anslinger archives. I think it was in Penn State. What was that like? Because he obviously was influenced by the Nazi drug laws. I'm curious what it would be like going through the archives of a guy like that.
I mean, it was a very dark day. It was like a winter day. It was heavily snowing, and my American translator, who did a great job in translating Trip, volunteered to drive me to Penn State from New York, which was like a 6-hour drive. And then he waited while I was in the archives, and he drove me back. So it was really a one-day trip to these archives. And while I was at the archives, I was actually quite stoned. I smoked a spliff before I went inside because I thought I'm going to do like I'm going to do the thing that Anslinger would have hated, smoking a spliff and enjoying my time.
A big fuck you to that piece of shit.
I mean, the archives, anyone can actually go. You just have to write an email and you can study it. I don't know if you want to, but it's kind of interesting because it gives you a sense of his mindset in those 50s especially, or 40s, or 30s even. He collected like true crime magazines. They are like, and they're all kind of right-wingish. So they're like, show white people how they defend themselves at their home or how the police helps them. It's always like racially connotated. Is that the right word? It's
racial connotations.
Yeah. It's a racist. It's not a racist experience, but you experience a racist mindset by looking at what he wrote, like letters he wrote, letters he received, magazines he collected. Also, he was part of a Playboy symposium. Playboy at the time in the early 70s, when he was part of that, or 60s was it maybe? It's in the book. I think it could be 66. It was like a magazine that still had some kind of intellectual discourse going. So there were like a few minds talking about drugs and that the public's using drugs, but it's illegal. And everyone's kind of talking about it in a sophisticated way, except Anslinger, who's just, his mindset really stopped in the 30s. Like he did not really evolve in the 30s. You know, he's a Nazi basically. I mean, he's the son of German Swiss immigrants to the United States. He's ultra right wing conservative right. You know, he hated black people. He was just, as you call him, a piece of shit. So the archive, it's kind of interesting, but it's also kind of boring. Like I knew most about him before I went. There's also books that he co-authored, and you can find out a lot, but it is, you know, also interesting. And then on the way back, we stopped at a restaurant in the countryside, and we had pumpkin martinis, and that was quite good.
Oh, yeah. Did you feel the spirit of Harry Anslinger spiting you for being high on marijuana? Did you feel his presence?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was a bit uncomfortable in those archives, even though the archivists they were really nice actually.
Yeah.
But the whole Penn State, I mean, they also had this scandal with the football. I mean, it was intense, you know.
Yeah. How did the archives in Penn State compare to the archives at Sandoz and Switzerland, which became Novartis? Because you also went to the Sandoz archives. Was there anything in the Sandoz archives that surprised you? Was there anything unexpected you ran into? What was that like?
The whole experience was completely unexpected. While the whole experience at the Penn State University archives are quite normal. Like it's an open, democratic archive, and anyone can actually go and look at the stuff, and the people are helpful. The archives you might find might be racist, but the experience itself, it's great, you know. Mm-hmm. While at Sandoz, it's not an official archive or not a university archive. It's a company archive, which is also open. I think to everyone, you have to just register, write an email that you want to see the company archives, and then they're very proud of them actually. But they don't have a find book, and a find book, maybe they have one, but they don't show it to the people who visit the archive. And a find book is like the overview of what's in the archives. Mm. Which you need, you know. You need to know what's in the archives. Otherwise, how could you know what you want to search for? So they don't show.
Sandoz didn't have this find book, and so you're just kind of do you wander around? Like, do you have to ask people? Like, what is?
Yeah, you have to ask the archivist. And I
Okay.
don't know if he knows the structure of the archive, like in his mind, or if he has a find book, because, the archive is next door. You sit in a room and then the stuff is brought, the documents are brought to you from the storage room. And I had a peek at the storage room because when I went to the toilet, you actually go through the storage rooms. And they're just, vaults or cupboards, which are labeled with numbers and countless documents are in there. Most of it is horribly boring. So how do you know what do you want to find? How are you going to find something? I wanted to find, the thing that interested me was a connection between Sandoz and the Nazis, because I had found in the concentration camp archives of the former concentration camp of Dachau that the Nazis had done psychedelic experiments with possibly LSD. So I wanted to find, maybe Sandoz send it to the Nazi, to a certain person, so that was difficult to figure out. But I was a bit, I don't know, maybe lucky, or maybe I'm very good at using archives. I don't know, but I think you always have to be lucky. But I was shocked when the archivist told me, just tell me what you're looking for and I'll find it for you. So I told him a little bit, but you don't want to, I don't know, some things you just want to find, you don't want to reveal what you're looking for, maybe, So it was difficult.
It's such an odd system. It's like going to a restaurant and there's no menu, and you have to ask you have to ask the chef if they have something
like that. There are restaurants like that.
Yeah.
Not many, but sometimes, like in Thailand, you go to a place and the cook comes and says, "I can make this," and then it's great, But normally we have a menu. We didn't have one there, so I was the first time I didn't find what I was looking for. I just looked at the Albert Hofmann files, the famous log book where he noted down when he first found LSD and when he took it by accident, and when he took it again. But everyone has looked at that, already, kind of. I mean, the Albert Hofmann papers.
Yeah.
Are
Albert Hofmann.
There.
I was going to say Hofmann, for people that don't know, was the first person to discover and ingest LSD, right? He synthesized LSD, and then he first took it on accident and then did a voluntary self-test of, I think it was 1/4 milligram or 250 micrograms. And so that was in the archives. You could read about that trip, the first LSD trip, in the archive. What was that like, reading about the guy who essentially started LSD? Like, there was no experience before his, because it sounds like that would be pretty wild.
Yeah, also he had a very strong trip, like me in Manhattan, because also I had no idea about LSD. He at least knew that he was taking a potentially powerful substance, I guess, but he was also very surprised by the effects, and he cycled home. That's why April 19th is famous bicycle day, where people take LSD and then ride their bicycles, because Albert Hofmann rode his bicycle home because he didn't want to stay in the lab. And then his home, like the walls had a different color. And I mean, he had a strong trip, and he also thought this is never going to end, I'm going to go insane. Then the doctor came, and the doctor examined his blood and whatever, and said, "You're totally fine. There's nothing wrong with you. I'm tripping." Okay, he didn't say tripping, but he said there's strange things happening in my head. So this is it's interesting, but it's not new, it's not, I like to see his handwriting and the original book where he wrote about it, and it's nice. And that's how the archivist actually tricks you, because he gives you this stuff and then you're happy and oh my God, I've seen something, but you actually have seen nothing. So I left the first day and I was on the mountain in Switzerland, and then I had the idea to go back to the archive and look at the files of the CEO of Sandoz, because Albert Hofmann, the chemist, he just discovered it by chance, but the company, turns it into a medicine, or maybe that in this case didn't. So I was looking at the papers of Stoll, which is the CEO. And this was actually not easy because the archivist didn't want to welcome me back to the archives. Like, he sensed that I was like onto something. So he said, don't come. I don't have time for you today, because I went, again the next day. And I still went. I just went, and he was a bit taken aback by me just coming. But, he's a hospital Swiss guy. Like, I come inside, but I can't help you today. And then I got into a conversation with him about LSD. And I had some LSD with me because I had just met a good friend in Zurich, and he had given me some LSD for my mother, against my mother's Alzheimer. She uses LSD microdosed. So I had some LSD with me, actually. And I said that to the archivist, have you ever seen LSD? And he's like, no, it's illegal. How can I see it? Well, but it was a product of your company a long time ago, and I have some. I want to offer you some, so at least you have some. You can put it here in the archive if you want. So he kind of laughed at that. And I gave him an LSD trip, and obviously he didn't take it, but he just, saw it for the first time ever,
Yeah.
And he became friendly, and then he said, so what, is there something you actually want to see today? And then I said, well, I want to see the papers of the CEO. He said, oh, that's no problem. And he just went next door, and he got me those letters. And in those letters, I found the smoking gun, as they say in America, right?
Yeah, those are the letters between Arthur Stoll and Richard Kuhn, the Nazi scientist.
Yeah, right.
Is those are the letters you're referring to?
Yeah. These were the letters I found. Like, this was the connection because you have to research a little bit more. Who is this Arthur Stoll? And this Arthur Stoll, the Swiss guy, his teacher was Richard Wildstetter, who was a Jewish German maverick and inventor of biochemistry, or one of the people that invented biochemistry, Nobel Prize winner. And he taught two people. He taught few people, but his two prodigy sons were Richard Stoll, the Swiss guy, who then left him to become CEO of Sandoz, and the other one was Richard Kuhn, who also left Wildstetter at a certain point in time to become Hitler's leading biochemist. So that's why Stoll and Kuhn were quite good friends. They were like on the same page, always had exchanged information and knowledge, always in the 20s and the 30s. And, Stoll was not an anti-Nazi. When the Nazis took over Germany, this was, in Switzerland, this is a neighboring country. They still had friendly relations, especially with their friends,
Oh, yeah.
And they continued sharing information. Also, Kuhn shared information with Stoll, so it went both ways. So Stoll informed Kuhn about LSD, and Kuhn became very interested in it because he was responsible also or working to develop a truth drug for the Nazis. And this LSD was very strong, so who thought maybe if you give it to people without telling them, maybe you can, control people or influence people. So the Nazis did this test series in the concentration camp of Dachau because of that connection between Stoll and Kuhn. So Stoll kind of spilled the beans into the wrong courtyard because suddenly the Nazis were interested in psychedelics and in LSD for their evil means, that how can we control people? And so of course, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, so the Dachau experiments with psychedelics came directly because of Stoll's correspondences with Kuhn, the Nazi scientist.
I would say they came indirectly because it's not like Stoll said to Kuhn, you should set up a test series in Dachau with our LSD. They were talking about LSD, and also Kuhn was not the scientist who did these experiments. This was done by an SS officer, Plötner. Kuhn was more like the scientist in the background, that he was in the highest, committee of, scientists that working for Hitler. They were thinking, he, for example, developed sarin, which is the most poisonous nerve gas. Kuhn did. So he was actually actively developing weapons, but he would not go into a concentration camp. He was not an SS guy. Like the SS ran the concentration camps. He was, I don't even know if he was in the Nazi party. He was just, working as a scientist during those times. And, he had no problem with collaborating with the government, which was in that case the Nazi dictatorship. And he said things like Heil Hitler when he was starting a lecture at university, sometimes, but not always. So he was not, he was a Nazi, but he was not a Nazi like the SS guy in the concentration camp who actually executed these tests. And I have also no paper trail between them, so I don't know exactly how the communication was. But the SS guy, he didn't invent this by himself. This was a bigger program, and Kuhn was one of the brains for the program of biochemical warfare.
Yeah, and you share a letter in the book where Kuhn, the Nazi scientist, thanks Stoll, the CEO of Sandoz, for his shipment of ergotamine, which can be used to synthesize LSD. Why do you think Stoll shipped Kuhn ergotamine and didn't just send him straight up LSD?
I don't know. I really don't know. There's no real reason for it. It's also possible that Kuhn made other molecules from ergotamine. So maybe what was used in Dachau wasn't LSD. Today, for example, in Berlin, you can buy legal LSD, which is the LSD molecule altered just a little bit. So it has LSD effects, but it's not illegal because it's not LSD. It's like a different molecule. So maybe Kuhn didn't make LSD. Maybe he was using ergotamine to make something else. There's no, I couldn't find more documents on this. I don't think they exist. I also went to the Kuhn archives in Berlin. This was very secret research that was being done.
Yeah, because when you mentioned the Dachau experiments, I'm thinking, did Stoll did Kuhn ask for the ergotamine possibly instead of LSD? Because like you said, he's looking to make various different compounds and not just one, because if you're experimenting on different people, different subjects, you're going to want more flexibility.
Yeah, it's quite possible. Maybe he also... Yeah, I don't know. There's no record for it, but it would be very interesting to be in Kuhn's lab in October 1943 when he receives 0.5 gram of ergotamine, which is quite a lot. What did he do with it, and who did he show it to, and did he take it himself? Was he on LSD maybe? I mean, it's a movie can start there, but not a nonfiction book.
Yeah. Well, was Stoll aware of the Nazis' obsession with mind control and looking for the truth serum when he sent Kuhn the ergotamine, or was that something that the Nazis were keeping under wraps? So they were obsessed with the other and trying to use a mind control drug to figure out who was against them.
There's no paper, no document that proves that Stoll knew about this. So it's speculation whether he did know. I think he didn't. I don't think Kuhn said, "Look, we're looking for a truth drug here. What you're telling me." But maybe they telephoned. I really don't know how far. Like Stoll is a very interesting character, and I paint him kind of as an antagonist, kind of a bad guy. But I'm not even sure that's true. He was a CEO of a big company. He collected art. I mean, he did some unethical things like buy, paintings from Jewish owners from Germany who had to sell cheap. But I guess many people did that. It doesn't automatically turn you into a Nazi. I mean, he was a Swiss guy. He was a businessman. He became very rich. He was very successful. He was very good as a chemist. He was under a lot of pressure because he, was leading pharmaceutical, big company. I think he was a very interesting character, actually. And, but he did not, manage, and I blame him for that, actually, I do. He did not manage, or he did not decide to go through with LSD, to really put it on the market, find the indications, make the clinical trials. He didn't do that. Because he was under pressure from the CIA. And I don't know how heavy that pressure was, because the CIA first the American military became interested in the SS experiments on the truth drug, and then the CIA became interested on those experiments. So that's how the American government became interested in LSD, because the Nazis were interested in it. So Stoll never said, I don't care what you CIA tell me, because the CIA was actually visiting him in his office in Basel, Switzerland, putting pressure on him. Don't put this out. We have the FDA. We're working with the FDA. Yeah. You're not gonna be happy in America if you insist on LSD. LSD is our thing. We're gonna examine it. And they probably didn't tell him what they want to do with it, but they said we have to keep this under wraps, basically.
Yeah. And so when the Americans went into post-World War II Germany and they were interacting with Nazi scientists or former Nazi scientists, that's when the connection was made about LSD and the mind control drug. Is that when the Americans, caught the psychedelic fever?
Well, the American forces had a special unit called ALSOS, ALSOS, with them. Like ALSOS contained of several units, and they were responsible for finding German scientists to interrogate them about nuclear research and also biochemical weapons research. So Richard Kuhn became one of their first interview partners. This was in Heidelberg in the spring of 1945. And after Kuhn talked about what he knew, because Kuhn was very cooperative, because for Nazi scientists at the time, either you received an invitation to continue your career in the United States under Operation Paperclip, or if you were a high-end scientist, you ended up in Nuremberg because you committed war crimes. And Richard Kuhn could have ended up on the bench in Nuremberg because he developed a nerve gas and, this influential scientist in Nazi Germany. So he was quite open to share his knowledge with Americans. He had no problems with Americans. And he later on came to America and advised companies in America and was at universities in America. And then he basically made peace with the new force. So the Americans learned about LSD during those debriefings, and you can see immediately a high-ranking general flies in from the States and travels after he meets Kuhn to Switzerland, to Basel, to the headquarters of Sandoz, receives LSD there from Stoll, actually Stoll's son in this case. Stoll doesn't meet with the American, but Stoll's son meets and gives the American general LSD, and then the American military examines LSD. They do this by employing a professor from Harvard University called Henry K. Beecher, who was a leading drug expert for the American military. So his advice was, he then received the SS reports from Dachau, so they were sent to him. They landed on his desk in Harvard, and he had to evaluate it. And he wrote back that yes, LSD and the other ego-depressant drugs, as they were called, because they depress the ego and other parts of the brain become more, active. These actually could be used as potential weapons, and he suggested that there should be a program to examine this. And this then landed on the desk of Sidney Gottlieb, who was a CIA executive who headed the MK-Ultra program. So it became his job then to examine, to finish the Nazis, test series, because the Nazis were interrupted because they lost the war. They couldn't finish, they didn't come to any conclusions except that you can seriously destabilize a person if you give him mescaline or LSD without telling the person. So Sidney Gottlieb kind of went into the details. He really refined that research over years.
Yeah, and in 1953, I think it was, that's when Allen Dulles, the director of the CIA, launches MK Ultra. He puts Sidney Gottlieb in charge. And for people that don't know, MK Ultra is a secret CIA program that was designed to brainwash people through torture and psychedelics. And you talk about it in the book extensively, MK Ultra and also Operation Midnight Climax, Sidney Gottlieb. Were there any new angles about MK Ultra or about Sidney Gottlieb that you came across in your research? Because I know MK Ultra has been written about extensively since it's been declassified. Was there anything that surprised you or anything new that you learned through your own research with the MK Ultra documents?
I mean, the interesting thing is, how did Gottlieb got interested in LSD? So that's the story that I summarized before. Like, how did it end up in his hands? Why did he think it was a potential weapon? Then what he does, the experiments he does, I mean, obviously they're interesting, but as you said, this has been written before. So I summarized it up. So if you read the book, you actually get, your memory gets refreshed, or your knowledge about it gets refreshed. I mean, certain, details, obviously, that, I focus on you. But the MK Ultra story in itself has been researched before. Just how it came into being is the thing that I focused on.
Yeah. So in the interest of time, because I know you have to get off in a bit, I wanted to fast forward about a decade, and I needed to ask you about the JFK and Timothy Leary connection and Mary Pinchot connection, because you write about Mary Pinchot, who's a close friend, rumored lover of Kennedy, and Mary Pinchot approaches Timothy Leary apparently about obtaining LSD for a quote unquote public figure. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, do you believe there's evidence to support Leary supplying Kennedy with LSD, or somehow like indirectly being involved with Kennedy getting his hands on LSD?
Well, I mean, it seems to be a fact that Pinchot visited Leary and asked for LSD for a very important person. And it is a fact that she was a close friend of John F. Kennedy and was seen smoking weed with him in the White House. You don't really see if someone is using LSD because they just take, a paper or something. And that's easy to hide, so no one would notice if Kennedy was tripping on LSD in the White House. But there's also no evidence. She could have used it with another very influential friend. There's indications, though, because Kennedy, I mean, if you look a little bit more at his, and I'm really not a Kennedy expert, I also think that probably he's a racist, right-wing kind of guy. Like, I mean, he's better than other presidents, but it's also I would glorify John F. Kennedy, but there is actually, if you look online, you can find a speech that he gave at the American University a few weeks after Pinchot visited Leary. So if it really was, if she really gave JFK Leary's LSD, it's an interesting story, because during that speech, like, he speaks about making peace in the world and all that, that contest with the Soviets about who has the most weapons is just ridiculous, and they should stop it. It's $1 billion waste, and we're all like the same people, and we're all, we're caring for our children, and we should, communicate. Like, he was really giving like this hippie-esque peace speech. And it was a big speech. I mean, at the university, it was a big event. And before that, he was more hawkish, like he was really playing the Cold War game. So it seems like he had a change of consciousness, which is, it sounds like a fairy tale LSD story, but there is a change in him. I mean, the speech is real. So there was a real change in him during the time when he was hanging out with Pinchot in the White House, and she had LSD on her. So maybe it was just a spliff. Maybe JFK said, "Oh my God, I can't take LSD. I'm scared.
Yeah.
But let's smoke some weed, And even on weed, you could become like a peacenik, I guess. And then, of course, is the assassination of him, which is still unclear why he was assassinated. So obviously, you can continue that story and think that because he becomes a peacenik suddenly, that the multi-billion-dollar arms industries, threatened, and then they decide to, take him out. I mean, it goes into I guess you call it conspiracy theories, or but it's also fun to think about it. It's fun to imagine JFK taking LSD in the White House and then suddenly realizing, what am I doing here? This is insane. We must stop this. This is the wrong way to go. So maybe he was really very much ahead of his time and intolerable for the system. Because that makes a lot of people jobless. That would create a completely different world, a psychedelic, peaceful world. That's what we all yearn for. But what the capitalist process actually doesn't allow. So it makes all the sense of the world that, yes, he took LSD and that's why he was assassinated.
Yeah.
But there's no proof for it. It's just a story.
Like you said, it's fascinating to speculate about, even if there is no direct evidence or correspondence between Leary, Pinchot, and Kennedy. The timeline that you pointed out, where Kennedy goes from the Cuban Missile Crisis and he's a supporter of arms buildup at the end of 1962. Then he has, possibly a meeting, the meeting with Pinchot and Leary takes place a few weeks after that. Then he gives this peace speech I think it's April, sometime in the beginning of 1963. At American University, where he says, and I pulled out a quote from the book where Kennedy says in his peace speech, "For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future, and we are all mortal." And it's like he's expressing this extreme skepticism about building up nuclear arms and continuing a path of violence within months after supporting the exact opposite. So he sounds like a guy that, whether it's psychedelics or not, had some sort of major mind altering experience. Like it's very hard, especially at that age, to be that neuroplastic and change your thoughts immediately unless someone has a gun to your head, which ironically he did. Yeah, exactly. So
maybe it was all things combined.
Yeah, and then JFK gets his brains blown out 6 months later. A lot of people think the CIA was involved. Pinchot gets shot twice in the head 10 months after JFK gets killed. And then Pinchot's diary is stolen, which both crimes remain unsolved today. So it is crazy shit to speculate about. Nonetheless, it's fun to think about.
The Pinchot story is a good movie.
Yeah, maybe after Magic Mushroom, you can pump out a script.
Magic Mountain.
Excuse me, Magic Mountain.
So
the last thing I wanted to get into, because you said you had to go around 10. It's 10:30 my time, 5:30 your time.
Like 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. So the last chapter of your book is called LSD for Mom. And I had heard you say on a previous interview that you originally wanted that to be the title of the book, that was one of the main titles you were pushing for, LSD for Mom. Can you talk about your mom's mental state and how LSD seemed to affect that?
Well, my mom has suffered from Alzheimer now for about 9 years, and we started the LSD therapy about 1.5 years ago, around Christmas, and she immediately had a good reaction to microdosed LSD, like a cognitive improvement, which in her case meant she could speak better with us. She was more in the room. She was more active. She was connecting much more than on Alzheimer, which is a very deconnecting disease. So we were always happy, and like when she took her first microdose psilocybin dosage, she picked up. This was on Mother's Day last year. She picked up the newspaper from the table and started reading it, and that was kind of astonishing because she hadn't looked at the newspaper for a long time. So without a doubt, when she's on these psychedelics, they help her. My father also thinks that it's a reason, and my father is not really, he was a judge before and a not he's not a drug person at all, but he thinks that this is the only medication that helps her. He also takes it microdose, but he never feels anything. I mean, his brain does, but he doesn't. But my mother really, she's in a better mood. She starts singing, and he sometimes loses faith in the treatment, and then he forgets for a while, and then he picks it up again, and he says, actually, it is good, and I should give it regularly every second day, but then he forgets again, and he's 81 himself, so. But we have made good experiences in the family.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember reading about the day where you, your mom, dad, I think it was your sister and her husband, a bunch of people in your family took the microdose together, and you said your mom just seemed much more alive, seemed much more, kind of there, as opposed to when she wasn't on it.
I mean, it's a fact that LSD stimulates the brain, so if your brain is being attacked by a disease and your synapses are, stopping to, communicate, and, your brain, and then you get something that has the opposite effect, like it reawakens, like it doesn't stop the disease. I guess to stop Alzheimer's, I would say you have to start early on. You have to probably use LSD to not get it, maybe, yeah. So if you have LSD, it's not going to stop the disease, but my father thinks it actually slows it down, so it's smoother trajectory. But this is only in our family, this might not help any other person, so it's not a clinical test, but we have seen improvements with our mother.
Yeah.
I think it's good. He's happy. My mother's happy. I'm happy. So this book Tripped has a personal angle to it. That's why for me it's one of my most treasured books.
Yeah, I mean that's what I loved about going through the book is that it's not just a straight historical analysis of LSD and the Nazi connection to LSD. There's also personal anecdotes intermixed between the historical facts, which makes it a much more smoother, exciting reading experience. And there's so much shit that we didn't get into, so you should definitely go pick it up if you're listening to this. If anything that we've spoken about interests you in any way, there's so many things, like the opening story with Leonard Pickard, who's one of the, 2 people convicted in the largest LSD manufacturing case in history, like that whole story. There's the Elvis Nixon connection, which is crazy. A lot of stuff about the Cold War that we didn't get into. So if you're interested in what Norman's been talking about at all, definitely go check out the book. It'll be a fascinating read.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Discuss these ideas.
Of course. Thank you. Where's the best place that people can not only check out the book, but also keep up with your work, keep up with what you're putting out there?
Well, I guess, I don't know. I'm not so into social media, but I have an Instagram account at Norman Ohler. You can obviously follow me. You can check out my website, normanohler.com. But I guess the best thing you should really do is buy Tripped, and probably buy it from your local bookshop. That's what I always hear is the best thing to do.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for the chat. And yeah, if you're listening to this, definitely go check out your local bookstore and pick up Tripped. So yeah, thank you, Norman.
Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
You too.